Hello and good morning. Welcome to today's webinar on dashboards with a difference, with a slight focus on being ready for the Ofsted report cards. So in today's session we will cover three main areas. Firstly, we're going to look at the iAbacus model and how that can be used as a way to provide insights into a dashboard at trust level. We're then going to look at the online tools that facilitate that and simplify that entire process. And then we'll talk about the tools that you can take away as participants in this session and use in your schools and in your trust. So first of all, let's talk about the iAbacus model and why that's used in dashboards. So first of all, dashboards are often very data heavy. If you're used to logging into a dashboard, you'll see tables of data, graphs, bar charts, pie charts, and sometimes it can be quite difficult from that amount of data to dig down to actually find the insights that you need to look at as a trust leader or as a school leader. With iAbacus and with the iAbacus model, we focus on four key questions that we ask people to actually help them self-evaluate, diagnose where they're at, and how to improve or sustain the performance or the effectiveness that they're currently having in their school or in their department or in their area of the trust. So what is the iAbacus and why is that part of this dashboard webinar that we're looking at today? Well, the iAbacus model is something that's been used in schools for about 40 years. And it was actually created by a really good friend of mine, John Pierce, who was a teacher, head teacher, an inspector, lead consultant at the National College, but his heart was in school improvement. And he worked out how to use an abacus, literally one of these, to help people look at what they do with a view to doing it better. And we've found that the insights that we can glean by using this model are perfect for building dashboards. And we're talking about dashboards that contain insights, hence dashboards with a difference. And you'll see later when we start to look at the criteria and the frameworks that we can use inside these dashboards that the latest announcement from Ofsted with the report cards, although that's causing a lot of friction in the sector at the moment, the criteria that's contained within these report cards are actually quite good for self-evaluation and really can help school leaders make accurate judgments about where they are on their journey to outstanding or exemplary as it might be now. So this model, really it was used to help people break down operational effectiveness or break down personal performance or departmental performance into various areas. So in education, that often in a school might be a bead for leadership and management or governance, a bead for attendance or behaviour or personal development, or as the new framework has it, looking at inclusion. So we have a bead for each of the areas. And that automatically helps people break things down into more manageable chunks. And people can instinctively make judgments about where they are in their level of effectiveness or performance or even achievement in a certain area. And the model really asks people to make a judgment by sliding a bead. And on an abacus, on this right hand side over here, this is where we have the highest level of performance: excellent, outstanding, exemplary. And down here, obviously, this is the lower level, so this in the new report cards might be causing concern or it might be inadequate. In some schools it's poor, in some frameworks it's just a level of 1, 2, 3, 4. But instinctively people could make judgments about where that aspect of provision, whether it be leadership or personal development or behaviour management, whatever it may be, they could make judgments about it and they could slide a bead. And there were four main challenge questions, if you like, that would be embedded into this process, into this model. And the first question would be, if you've made this instinctive judgment about where you think things are currently, what criteria have you based that judgment on? What challenge questions, what KPIs are you looking at? What indicators, what grade descriptor have you used? What national standards? Because that judgment doesn't need to be something based just on your gut or your professional knowledge, however accurate that might be. Really, we need to base that on agreed criteria. So that's what that first stage would involve, looking at the national standards, the agreed criteria. The second challenge to that judgment would be, what evidence do you have to support it? What can you signpost right now that's happening in your department, in your school, in your trust, in your area, that really supports and makes that a sound judgment? And the next question, actually my favourite part of this model, of this process, is what helped you get to that point? What were the helping factors that have pushed that bead to where it is today? The things that we need to sustain or improve, and we need to list and be aware of those helping factors. On the other side, in fact I just gave away what we call them, quite naturally we call them hindering factors. And whenever we slide a bead on an abacus to a certain level and we stop, mentally we've stopped because there are hindering factors. There are things stopping us being outstanding, excellent, exemplary. What are those hindering factors? If we can diagnose what those hindering factors are, then we can put actions in place to overcome them. So then that leads us naturally into the action planning. What are the things that we need to do to remove those hindering factors? Let's look at what they are. Who do they involve? What would our success criteria be? When do we need to do those things by? So what you can see is this model starts with self-evaluation, leads into the analysis, what's helping, what's hindering, and then helps us hopefully put plans in place to move these beads, whatever areas it is we're evaluating, into this top level. And over time, that's what we want to do. So this model was used by a good friend of mine in education. It was used on flip charts, great big A1 flip charts. It was used with a literal wooden abacus like that, and it really got people thinking about where they were and then with a view to doing whatever they were doing better. And we use this model in our online tools, and we use it in iAbacus. Naturally, that's the online version. We use it in MATvista, which is the same tool but focused for multi-academy trust, quality assurance and risk registers and looking at trust descriptors. And we embed this in a school and we let people use it and we empower them, and then the insights that we gather using that model we make available in dashboards. And we do this by overlaying and combining abacuses, because those beads really do reveal a huge amount of insight. So what I'd like to do now is to show you the online tool, how it works. And this is something that you can take away and use in your schools, in your trust, to hopefully empower people through that same process that I've just demonstrated, but also glean the insights to inform your leadership and the decisions that you make as a trust leader. So let's have a look at the online tool. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to open up a web browser, because that's obviously the tool is an online tool, so that's all we need. And hopefully here now you can see I've got an abacus, and interestingly this is the EIF. This is the current Education Inspection Framework. And it doesn't have to be that we have an abacus mapped to an inspectorate's framework. It could be that we use a specific set of criteria because we're looking at something very focused. So if in a school they need to look at improving attendance, it might be that they use the EEF criteria for reflection on attendance. And here you can see an abacus. It works in the same way. We've got beads that represent where current effectiveness lies. We're not using standards or levels across the top, we're just using a star rating, but this abacus will function in the same way. We might have an abacus for a teacher's own reflection and their own growth plan. It could be we have an abacus for learners, helping them with their EHCP objectives or certain aspect of their learning. And as I mentioned earlier, we might even have an abacus mapped to the new Ofsted report card criteria, and that is what this would look like. So abacuses are flexible, completely customizable. We can tailor them in our schools, we can tailor them in our trusts, and we can empower people to use them and go through that step-by-step process. So let's have a look at that in action. I'll tell you what, why don't we just use the Ofsted report card? I know that it's causing quite a lot of discussion in the sector at the moment, but actually when we look at this as a self-evaluation tool, something that we can then put into a dashboard, this is incredibly powerful. So down the left hand side you can see the new areas of the report card. leadership, governance, curriculum, developing teaching, achievement, broken down into 2 different areas, behaviour, attendance. These are the things that we're going to consider, we're going to evaluate. And across the top are different levels. So we might be more familiar with inadequate through to outstanding, but actually in certain trusts, in certain countries, that language changes. So here, for example, we've now got causing concern, secure, strong, exemplary. Okay, the beads, as they always do, represent the current level of effectiveness or performance. So how did those beads get there? Well, an individual head teacher or leader within a school or a school improvement advisor might work with a school and they might make a judgment, and they might slide that bead to the appropriate level that they think they perform at the moment. So they might confidently put that into strong. That would be good, wouldn't it? And as soon as they do that, they're launched into this improvement model, this strategic view of where they're at based on evidence, analysis and improvement planning. Let's go through this model. Remember earlier we talked about how people make instinctive judgments like I just did there. Well, it would be good, wouldn't it, to check the criteria. So click on the criteria and straight away we now load in these identifying features, or this grade descriptor of what strong looks like. And this is taken straight from the report card framework. Yes, it's in draft at the moment, but come autumn time this year this will be settled and we'll be able to use it. So it might be that I look at this and I think, actually, are we strong? Maybe we're secure, and we can just have a look at the difference there in the criteria. It might be actually that I've over-egged this and I need to kind of moderate this judgment and bring this right down to attention needed. Okay, that could be the current position of leadership and governance in my school if I was making that judgment. Okay, I'm going to leave the bead there and I'm going to move on to the next stage. So the next stage in this model is about providing evidence. Okay, now this is the section that a lot of people kind of don't like to do, but it's important. We've got to signpost our evidence, so whatever we're making a judgment in, there will always be things that we can identify to support that judgment. And we encourage people to be really succinct, evaluative. If there is data that they're including, then they can attach it or they can upload it. They can hyperlink to it, so they could link to data if they need to. Okay, we're not going to spend a long time looking at this, but you can imagine that schools or head teachers in schools or middle leaders, they provide signposting towards that evidence that justifies that judgment. And actually, as a trust leader, if you're looking at someone's judgment, you want to know that they've been able to back that up with evidence and supporting. So that's the evidence section. And you can see that this model is robust because we're making instinctive judgments, checking them against criteria, but then we're now providing evidence to support those judgments. Let's move on to the next stage. We're now going to move on to the analysis. Why are we at this position? We've dragged the bead to attention needed. That's the level, if you like, the descriptor. What's helped us get to this point? Okay, it could have been that we put the bead somewhere down here, but we didn't. We put it here, just on the edge of secure. In the analysis, what has helped us get to that position? And this is important now because we're starting to engage people in this thinking process of why we're at this point. And this is why this tool helps kind of glean the insights. And these are the insights we're going to look at later in the dashboard. So for example, in here, I'd simply enter a series of helping factors, things that me and the team think have pushed us in the right direction, got us to where we are. If something was a big help in our school or in my department, I might put that in here, if I could spell it correctly, and then I might move that to the top and say, actually, in my teaching, in my classroom, whatever it may be, this has helped so far. Okay. On the right hand side, we would advise that people are really honest, make a really honest kind of discussion about what's hindering. They're not afraid of negative language. Sometimes schools don't want to say this lack of this or this insufficient of this. We want people to make an honest appraisal of how things really are. So we'd encourage them to list the hindering factors. These are insights, because if I'm a head teacher or lead in my department, or if I'm in charge of personal development or SMSC, whatever it may be, and I start to now really identify the things that are hindering, a head teacher, a member of the central team, a coordinator at trust level, these are the things that they're going to be able to view in the dashboard. It could be that I reprioritise some of these and say, actually, at the moment, this is the real hindering factor. When we've completed this diagnostic process, this force field analysis, we move through into the action planning. Okay, and this is where we kind of move away from evaluation and diagnostic into that strategic forward thinking. What are we going to do about these things? Some of these things we'll be wanting to strengthen, make sure they happen again. Some of these things we want to tackle and eliminate, remove the hindering factor. We're realists, we know that people can't work on everything, so the first thing really to do is just to hide anything that's not part of this current cycle of planning. And there will be things that we can just hold off working on, but there'll be things that are a priority, and for those things we need to move them to the top, we need to expand them, and then we need to say, right, what are we going to do about this? We've identified it as a hindering factor. It's stopping us being strong or secure or exemplary. What are we going to do about it? And this is where we lead people through just a simple planning strip. What do they intend to do? Who's going to lead on that? What success will look like? When do we need to do it by? Maybe it's something we need to do every year, or maybe it's something we can put a deadline on. Most likely we might have started working on this. Often when we know there's an issue in school, we tend to focus on it and start working on it. So it might be that there is some progress already made, and I can actually put a progress note in here and actually say, actually this is something we've started to work on. Okay, so that's the Abacus model. Just to recap, we slid that bead to make a judgment. Okay, we checked the criteria to see whether it was relevant and accurate. We looked at evidence, we signposted what was helping or hindering, we looked at evidence to support the judgment, and then we dived into the helping and hindering factors, and then we planned actions to improve. And that's why this program, this package, based on the model, empowers people. It guides them through that process. And if we do that, as a school, I've got my self kind of reflective report card, if that's what we want to call it, and I can export that. And I can talk to governors about it. I can show an inspector if I needed to. I can work with my central team. And in here, this is a PDF document. I've got it in here. I've got my evidence, my signposting, my helps and hinders, and my action plan. And it's concise, it's clear, it's incredibly robust because it's a sound judgment backed up by evidence, supported with analysis, and I've got my improvement planning. Now, that is just one way of using the tool, okay, to do a school improvement plan, a school self-evaluation. As I showed you earlier, the same model can apply if we were looking at attendance or behaviour or reading in a primary school, or curriculum areas as a subject lead, or my own performance. Now, the beauty of this tool is that at any point we can share these abacuses. I can share them with my peers and ask for support and input, or I can share them with line managers or senior leaders. And when I share them, the person that gets hold of them on their dashboard, if you like, can do something quite special. Okay, let me show you what they can do. Okay, so let's say, for example, I have a number of schools in my trust, and I empower them with an abacus to help them, to support them, to help them look at current criteria, to make judgments. When they share that with me, I'm able to overlay them and stack them. Now, I know those two words are new in the kind of way of dashboards, but let me show you what I mean. Here we've got a series of abacuses. What I'm going to do is to select all of them, and then I'm going to overlay them on one central screen. Okay, very quickly now, I've got an instant overview of where our schools are performing currently. Okay. Now, depending on the type of thinker you are, my eye is naturally drawn to those red beads, and I want to know, why is that bead at that position? So what I might do is I might move over here. I might look at curriculum in a certain area, and I might click on that bead, and I might say, okay, what is the evidence for that judgment? What's the analysis? What are they helping and hindering? What's hindering that school to the position that they've put that bead in causing concern? And what are they going to do about it? So we start. Oh, my cat's jumped on the desk. I do apologise. So we look at the helping and hindering factors, why they're at that current point, and then the action planning, how they're going to drive improvement, how they're going to get them out of that position. Now, that's looking at the negatives, that's looking at kind of the causing concern, where we want to kind of direct some of our attention. But of course, over here, we've even got a couple of schools, because I can see that with the number 2 here. I can see a number 2, I can click on this. We've got a couple of academies here who have dropped that bead into exemplary. What's their evidence for that judgment? Let's have a look at Northgate. We'd dive into this, we'd look at their evidence, we'd see, okay, what's their analysis, what's helped them get to that point? Is there some best practice here that we can replicate across the trust? So you can see, when we're looking at an abacus, we know that behind every bead is someone's judgment, backed up with evidence, followed through with a diagnostic of helping and hindering factors, and then supported with their action planning on how they're going to sustain that performance if it's exemplary like we're looking at here, but maybe it's action planning to get them out of a certain position. So full of insights. Sometimes the overlays are what schools love, what trusts love. Sometimes actually it's the stacks. Okay, and I can switch this to a stacked view, and you'll see why we call it a stacked view in a moment, simply because we just stack the abacuses on top of each other. I like this because you can see judgments in context. So for example, here we've got some secure performance, effectiveness in certain areas, but actually national results as far as the achievement goes, so the tests and the exams. It'll be interesting to see what the evidence is, what the actual data might be behind that bead. But that allows you just to scroll through these beads here. Okay, a moment ago we created a PDF report from a single abacus, just like a school might do if they were creating a report for governors or for trustees. But what about if you need a report of this overlay? Well, quite simply, you just go up to export PDF. You might say this is a trust-wide view of whatever it may be, trust-wide view of blah. You may even look at the options in here and you may say, do you know what, we're just going to look at leadership and governance and developing teaching. Let's take everything else out because we're creating a PDF for a meeting with trustees. We don't want to get distracted talking about inclusion and attendance. We want to focus on leadership and developing teaching. Let's create a PDF report of that, and it will give you a concise, very clear document containing all of the beads, and then behind each bead, if there's evidence and analysis, it would appear here. So creating PDF reports is inbuilt into the tool, but it's a very customizable approach. When you have a meeting to talk about a certain area of performance, it could be safeguarding, behaviour management, whatever it is, you simply log into your abacus, look at your stack or your overlay, and create that PDF report. So what we've got here is a really flexible tool. We can see that it can make dashboards, quite a different type of dashboard for your trust. We're very open for you now taking this tool, customizing it. We haven't really talked about customization, but actually in here what you can do, you can start with any abacus you prefer to choose. So it might be the Ofsted EIF, it might be the report card, and you can tailor these templates. So it could be in your trust you want to look at the areas from the EIF, the current inspection framework, but actually you might want to take out early years and sixth form because they're not part of your provision, and you might add into here certain specialist areas. You might say, actually we want to look at SMSC and British values in our schools. That's a priority for us, so let's put that in as an area. We actually want to look at buildings and grounds because your facilities might be needing updating, so buildings and grounds could be something that you're looking at and considering, and you want schools to evaluate where they feel things are at with regards to those areas. So it's very easy to customise an abacus. The reason I got into customization, just because I was talking about you taking away and using this in your trust. So please feel free to get in touch to have this embedded in your trust. As a participant of this webinar, we have agreed to give you 3 months access for use in 3 of your schools as a pilot project to show how easier this is to embed and how insightful the dashboards that it creates are. So if you're interested in that, please click through on the comments or contact me. My name is Daniel O'Brien and I obviously work at iAbacus. My email address will be linked into the description on the webinar website. Please feel free to get in touch. I hope you like what you've seen today. Any questions? Let's open up for the Q&A. Just bear with me while I stop sharing